Have you ever been hurt the most by someone who seemed to love you the most? Sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come with warnings or harsh words. Instead, they come disguised as a warm hug, a bright smile, or an old family photo that tugs at your heartstrings. They ask, "How have you been?" just after draining your energy. They whisper, "I love you," right before crossing your boundaries once again. And you let it happen, not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way you were taught to confuse love with endurance. But here's a hard, liberating truth from Stoic wisdom. Being kind and good doesn't mean being a doormat. Loving unconditionally does not mean tolerating everything unconditionally. Some behaviors, even from the closest people in your life, cross a line that should never be ignored. In this video, we're going to dive deep into 5 specific behaviors that you must never accept from anyone, whether it's your partner, your boss, or even your own family. Remember the words of Epictetus, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." You're not hurt by others' actions. You're hurt by allowing those actions to continue unchecked. So if you've ever left a conversation feeling smaller, quieter, or like you're fading away from your own life, this message is for you. Let's get started. Real damage never starts with a scream. It begins quietly, almost invisibly. Maybe it's a sigh, a subtle jab. "Why do you always do it that way?" "That shirt again, really?" One little comment today, another tomorrow, then the next week, each one chipping away at your confidence. Before you know it, you're second-guessing yourself, hesitating before you speak, filtering your words carefully. Not because you doubt your own thoughts, but because someone has taught you, slowly and deliberately, that you're always a little bit wrong. But here's the difference. That isn't feedback, it's erosion. There's a fine line between guidance and control. True, constructive feedback is clear, kind, and meant to help you grow. Constant criticism, however, is vague, repetitive, and aimed at tearing down who you are, not just what you do. You hear it in the tone of voice. You feel it deep in your gut. Instead of sharpening your spirit, it shrinks it. Within families, it hides behind comparisons. Your cousin already bought a house. Your sister never talks back. In relationships, it cloaks itself in sarcasm. "Relax, I'm just being honest." "You're too sensitive." At work, it wears the mask of perfectionism. "You did this, but next time maybe don't." "Good job, but I wish you were more like..." And here's the danger. The more familiar this becomes, the more you normalize it. The ache dulls. You stop fighting the silence. Eventually, you start editing yourself just to survive in the relationship. But Stoicism teaches us a powerful lesson. What you allow, you teach. If you keep allowing someone to slowly erode your worth, you're sending a message, whether you want to or not, that it's acceptable. And that is a lesson no one should ever have to teach themselves. Building on the story of the silent wounds we allow others to inflict upon us, let's take a deeper look at how we confront and protect our self-worth. Stoicism teaches us that the boundaries you accept are the lessons you teach others. When you let someone chip away at your value little by little, day after day, you are silently giving them permission to continue. Epictetus once said, "No one can harm you without your consent." Criticism that attacks your dignity is not a valuable lesson. It is a subtle form of control. So how do you respond? Start by recognizing that feeling, the tightness in your chest, the exhaustion after a conversation, the shrinking of your posture. These are not overreactions. They are warning signs. Your soul has been trying to send these signals for a long time, telling you something isn't right. You don't need to shout or explain at length. You simply need to set a boundary with calm, clarity, and conviction. Because the longer you tolerate constant criticism, the more you lose your inner voice. And when you lose that voice, you lose the compass that guides your entire life. Don't confuse endurance with wisdom, nor politeness with peace. Sometimes, healing begins with a simple sentence. That felt like criticism, not care. Say it once, then step back and watch who meets you with respect and who only knows how to control. It always starts small. An unexpected late-night call, an uninvited opinion about your life, someone borrowing your time, energy, or space without ever asking first. You brush it off, telling yourself it's no big deal, but deep down something feels wrong. A quiet voice inside whispers, "This isn't okay." You silence that voice because it's your parent, because it's your sibling, because it's someone who says they love you. But here's the truth: love without respect is just possession. And if someone refuses to honor your boundaries, they're not loving you, they're managing you. Once knew a man whose mother showed up at his home unannounced every week. She had a key. She'd walk in, rearrange things, comment on his groceries, open his mail. When he finally asked her to call before visiting, she laughed and said, "I'm your mother. I don't need permission." That sentence stayed with him for years, not because it was loud, but because it revealed everything about how she saw him as an extension of herself, not as a separate human being. This is what boundary violation looks like. Not just bold, disrespectful acts, but subtle patterns that say, "What matters to you doesn't matter to me." And the longer you allow it, the more you forget that your time, space, and emotional energy belong to you. Some people cross boundaries because they were never taught what boundaries are. They were raised in environments where love meant access, privacy meant rejection, and closeness meant control. But others, they know exactly what they're doing. They don't break through your limits with force. They test them. They lean in just enough. They apologize just enough. They twist your empathy into guilt until you become a yes machine. And when you finally say no, they say, "Wow, you've changed." But what they really mean is, you stopped letting them control you. Stoicism teaches us that boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about protecting what's worth keeping close. Your peace, your focus, your soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, but I'd argue it also becomes colored by the people we allow in unfiltered." So how do you respond? You start by shifting the energy. When someone crosses a line, don't explain your worth. Building on the importance of setting clear and firm boundaries, let's explore how to assert your standards and protect yourself from those who cross the line. Clarify your standards. You might say calmly but firmly, "Please don't come over without calling first," or "I'm not comfortable discussing that topic," or "I'm not available right now." Simple, direct statements. No apologies needed. But the most important part is to follow through. Because boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. If someone keeps crossing the line after you've made it clear, you don't owe them more warnings. You owe yourself action. Limit your time with them, shift the dynamic, or if necessary, walk away completely. Stoic strength isn't about building walls. It's about drawing lines with quiet conviction and having the discipline to stand by them. Because the moment you stop treating your boundaries as optional, you teach others how to love you in a genuine way. Not through guilt, not out of obligation, but through respect. Some wounds don't bleed. They leave no bruises or visible marks, yet they're there. In the way you question your memory, in the way you second-guess your own emotions, in the way you start sentences with, "Maybe I'm just too sensitive," even though deep down, you know you're not. That's the power of gaslighting, one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation because it doesn't destroy you from the outside. It dismantles you from within. It often starts with small contradictions. "I never said that." "You're imagining things." "Don't be so dramatic." You walk away from conversations feeling off, like you've lost an argument you didn't even realize you were in, as if your brain is being rewired, but you can't explain how. Over time, you start to question your own reality. Was I really wrong? Maybe I'm too emotional. Maybe I am the problem. No, you're not. You're being played. Gaslighting isn't a misunderstanding, it's a strategy. It turns your clarity into confusion, your confidence into doubt, your voice into silence, and the person who uses it doesn't want communication. They want control. They win when you start keeping score with yourself instead of with them. They win when your truth becomes negotiable, when your reality becomes a courtroom where they are the judge. But here's the Stoic truth. Your mind is a fortress. No one, no matter how charming, how close, or how subtle, has the right to occupy it without your permission. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." That doesn't mean the abuse is your fault. It means your power begins when you stop letting them define the terms of reality. So what can you do? Stop debating. Gaslighters aren't interested in the truth. They want dominance. Instead of arguing, observe. Start writing things down. Track their words. Track your reactions, not for revenge but for clarity. Talk to someone outside the situation, someone you trust who will say, "No, you're not crazy, that actually happened." That moment when your memory is validated is when healing begins. Finally, set a boundary. Not a threat, not a long speech, but a line with clear consequences. If the pattern repeats, you don't need to shout. You just need to step back, detach, and reclaim your mind. Because gaslighting doesn't steal your power all at once. It takes it slowly, one small moment at a time, until one day you stop recognizing yourself, picking up from the power of refusing to let others manipulate your mind. Let's now explore what happens when truth is hidden and dishonesty seeps into relationships. Today you see it clearly, you feel it in your gut. And from this moment forward you make a decision. You will no longer betray your own mind just to make someone else feel comfortable. This isn't weakness, this is wisdom, and the very moment you trust yourself again, you become someone no manipulator can ever touch. There comes a moment you'll never forget, when someone looks you in the eye and lies. Not a mistake, not a white lie, but a deliberate, calculated distortion of the truth. And something inside you breaks. Not just your trust in them, but your trust in yourself. Because if they can lie so effortlessly, you start to wonder, what else have I missed? Was any of it real? Dishonesty rarely shows up as one big betrayal. No, it's much more cunning. It comes in droplets, a skipped detail, a story that subtly shifts, a promise quietly forgotten. At first, you give them the benefit of the doubt. But then you start collecting red flags like souvenirs, until one day you realize you've been building a relationship on shifting sand. This is where Stoicism draws the line with striking clarity. Seneca once wrote, "Truth is the first lesson of friendship, because without truth there is no relationship, only performance, only illusion." People often say they lie to protect your feelings, but in truth, they're protecting their own convenience. They lie because telling the truth would require effort, accountability, or risking the image they've worked so hard to sell you. And make no mistake, dishonesty comes in many forms. There's omission, the things they choose not to say. Minimization, it's not a big deal. Deflection, why are you always so paranoid? And betrayal wrapped in kindness, saying all the right things while doing all the wrong ones behind your back. It all leads to the same place. You start losing your footing, you second-guess your memory, and worst of all, you stop trusting your own judgment. That damage isn't just emotional, it's neurological. Studies show that repeated exposure to deception can erode your confidence in your own perception of reality. That's not love, that's sabotage. So what does a Stoic do in the face of dishonesty? First, you stop listening to words. You begin watching behavior. Because people lie with words, but truth always leaks through their actions. Second, you stop trying to fix them. Their dishonesty is not your responsibility. You don't need another conversation. You need a decision. Third, you reclaim your clarity. You write down the contradictions. You anchor yourself back to your truth, and you let the silence between you grow, and not out of anger, but out of respect for your own peace. Because here's the brutal truth. When someone lies to you over and over again, they are silently saying, your trust is disposable, your peace is negotiable, your clarity is optional, and your response must be final. No more. It often begins with a smile, a laugh, a teasing comment. Maybe you laugh along. Maybe you force a grin, but something tightens in your chest. Something deep inside whispers, that wasn't funny. That was a hit. Because disrespect disguised as humor is one of the most socially accepted forms of emotional abuse, and just like that, what seemed like a harmless joke turns into a weapon. In the last scene, we explored the quiet cruelty that hides behind dishonesty, betrayal in a whisper, not a scream. But sometimes the blade doesn't come wrapped in silence. It comes wrapped in laughter. It slips under the radar. It doesn't raise its voice, it just chuckles. It hides its sharp edge behind a well-timed punchline. And when you flinch, when your body instinctively reacts, they tilt their head and say, you're too sensitive. Sound familiar? If it does, you're not imagining things. And no, you're not overreacting. You're being baited. I remember once hearing a woman say something that still echoes in my mind. It wasn't the insult that finally broke me. It was realizing I had spent 20 years laughing at my own humiliation just to keep the peace. Let that sink in. 20 years. Not of anger, not of conflict, but of silent, aching self-betrayal masked as laughter. Here's the truth they don't want you to see. People who hide cruelty behind humor know exactly what they're doing. They don't accidentally touch your sore spots. They study them. They find your insecurities, your softest bruises, and shape their jokes to land precisely there over and over again. Then they cover it all up with a smirk and a shrug. I'm just being honest. Come on, don't be dramatic. If you can't take a joke, that's on you. But let me ask you this. If a joke only works one way, and if the only person laughing is the one holding the knife, is that really humor? Or is it domination dressed in a clown suit? The Stoics knew the answer. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let your words be few and well chosen. Like a physician's knife, I'm used to heal, not to wound." That wasn't just poetic, it was a principle. So let's make something clear. Brutal honesty isn't a virtue. It's a mask, a cover for emotional laziness. An excuse to say whatever you want without doing the inner work of kindness and self-control. Real honesty, the kind that Stoicism honors, is both brave and compassionate. It doesn't mock, It doesn't tear down, it builds. Even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. So what do you do when the joke cuts deeper than the surface? You stop laughing. You stop rewarding cruelty with silence. You don't need to argue. You don't owe anyone a lecture. You can simply say, "That felt disrespectful." Then let the discomfort fall where it belongs, on them. Because here's a Stoic truth that might sting a little. You don't owe anyone your tolerance for disrespect, not even if they're family. Especially if they're family. If someone keeps hiding poison in their punchlines, you don't have to drink it just to keep the peace. You are not the uptight one. You are not the difficult one. You are the one who finally had enough, and that is not weakness, that is strength, cloaked in dignity. Now take a breath. You've just walked through 5 behaviors that can quietly dismantle your spirit. Constant criticism, boundary violations, emotional manipulation, chronic dishonesty, and disrespect dressed as humor. None of these things leave visible bruises, but each one leaves invisible scars. And perhaps the most painful part? They usually come from the people we trust the most. A partner who claims love yet chips away at your self-worth. A family member who wraps guilt in the language of care. A friend who mistakes your silence for permission to keep crossing your lines. But here's the hardest truth of all, and also the most empowering. What you tolerate, you teach. Every time you say nothing, every time you swallow the hurt and call it keeping the peace, you're teaching them that your boundaries are optional, but not anymore. Because now, you see clearly. And Stoicism? It was never about being passive. It's not about gritting your teeth or pretending not to care. It's about awareness, agency, discernment. It's about knowing exactly where your peace ends and where someone else's chaos begins. Marcus Aurelius didn't teach us to endure everything. He taught us to see things as they are and to act accordingly. That means you choose who gets access to your energy. You choose who earns a seat at your table. And most importantly, you choose who no longer qualifies to speak into your life. You don't need permission to protect your peace. What you need is courage. So here's your next step. Start with one truth, one line, one boundary you've been too afraid to voice. Maybe it's finally saying, "I don't find that funny," or "That's not okay with me anymore." Maybe it's choosing to let silence speak, not as a shield of survival, but as the sound of your self-respect returning home. When you stop laughing off what hurts you, you're not just protecting yourself. You're beginning to build a life that truly honors you. Whatever truth you choose to speak, and let it be real. No need for decoration. No need to please, just honesty. From the very place where you once felt pain. Because the moment you stop tolerating what wounds you, that's when you start shaping a life that respects who you are. A life with no space for pretending, no room for toxic ties, no tolerance for smiling through disrespect. And when you rise in that space, the one you chose to protect, you're not just surviving anymore. You're rising, quietly, steadily, without needing to prove a thing. If this video resonated with you, don't let it pass by like so many things you once kept quiet about. Leave a comment. Share your story. Because someone out there needs to hear it. They need to know they're not the only one enduring in silence. Your truth might be the first light in someone else's darkness. If you felt seen today, go ahead and like this video. And subscribe to Life Through Stoicism for more insights to help you protect your peace, sharpen your clarity, and strengthen your spirit, one day at a time. And always remember this: we don't become harder to survive life. we become wiser. To live it well because you were never meant to be anyone's emotional punching bag. You were meant to stand tall, speak truth, and draw the line with love, with calm, and with power.